My name is Jason, 29 years old, and last year I inherited my grandfather Walter's country house. It was my sanctuary, my dream home, until my parents dropped a bombshell. They wanted me to sell it so my sister Amanda could have an apartment because she was pregnant. Their demand shattered me, but what they never expected was my solution. 2 weeks later, I secretly sold the property. When my father broke in to assess what he thought was still mine, he had no idea who the new owner was. Before I tell you how my father ended up in handcuffs on my former front porch, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If this story of family betrayal sounds familiar, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. My grandfather Walter was more than just family. He was my mentor, my friend, and the one person who truly understood me. From the age of 7, I spent every summer at his country house, a charming 3-bedroom cabin sitting on 5 acres of wooded land about 2 hours outside of Chicago. The property had been in our family for 2 generations, purchased by my great-grandfather after returning from World War II. Those summer days were filled with learning carpentry in his workshop, fishing in the nearby creek, and listening to his stories on the wraparound porch as fireflies danced across the lawn. Grandpa Walter taught me how to use tools before I could even ride a bike properly. By 12, I had helped him build a new deck. By 16, we had renovated the entire kitchen together. "This house has soul, Jason," he would say, running his weathered hand along the oak banister he had carved himself. "These walls have heard 50 years of laughter and tears. You cannot buy that kind of history." When I graduated college and took a high-pressure job at a marketing firm in the city, those weekends at Grandpa's house became my escape. The corporate world was suffocating me with its endless meetings and artificial deadlines. But at the country house, time slowed down. I could breathe again. Then came the diagnosis: pancreatic cancer, stage 4. My grandfather faced it with the same quiet dignity he approached everything in life. During his final months, I took leave from work to care for him. We spent those days completing his bucket list of house projects. Even as his body weakened, his spirit remained unbroken. "Jason," he said to me one evening, as we watched the sunset from his porch, "this house needs someone who understands its value beyond dollars and cents. Your parents never appreciated it. They see property as investment, not as home." He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "I am leaving it to you. Promise me you will honor its spirit." I promised him I would. 2 weeks later, he was gone. The reading of the will confirmed what he had told me. The country house was mine, along with a modest sum to help with maintenance. My parents seemed unsurprised, but vaguely annoyed. My sister Amanda barely looked up from her phone during the attorney meeting. None of them had visited Grandpa regularly during his illness. They had always considered the country house too rustic, too far from civilization. After the funeral, I made a dramatic decision. I quit my marketing job and moved to the country house permanently. My plan was to work remotely as a freelance graphic designer while gradually renovating the property. Each project felt like a continuation of conversations with my grandfather. I restored his workshop, expanded the vegetable garden, and repainted the exterior the exact shade of blue he had always loved. For the first time in my adult life, I felt true peace. I made friends in the small community nearby. Logan, who owned the hardware store, became a regular visitor, always ready to offer advice on my renovation projects. Martin, the local veterinarian, would stop by with his dogs for weekend hikes through the woods. I was building a life that felt authentic and connected to something greater than myself. My relationship with my parents had always been strained. Robert and Catherine Williams had clear expectations for their children, and I had rarely met them. They valued status, financial success, and appearances. They lived in an upscale suburb in a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine but never felt like a home. Our conversations were superficial, revolving around career advancement and social connections. My sister Amanda had always been better at playing their game. 2 years younger than me, she had followed their prescribed path precisely. Prestigious college law degree position at a well-known firm. She dated men they approved of, currently Tyler Anderson, a banking executive from a good family. She called weekly and visited for all the appropriate holidays with the right gifts and the right stories. I had always been the disappointment. The one who questioned their values, who preferred making things with my hands to climbing corporate ladders. My move to the country house only widened the gap between us. They saw it as me, wasting my potential, burying myself in the middle of nowhere. Then came Amanda's announcement. She was pregnant. My parents were ecstatic about their first grandchild. Suddenly, family gatherings were centered around nursery colors and baby names. I was happy for my sister, though we had never been particularly close. I sent her a handcrafted crib I had made in Grandpa's workshop. She sent a polite thank you note, but never mentioned it on our infrequent calls. I had no idea that her pregnancy would soon become the catalyst for the most painful family confrontation of my life. The first sign of trouble came 6 months after I had settled into the country house. It was a crisp October morning when I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. Through the kitchen window, I spotted my parents' luxury SUV pulling up. They had not called ahead, which was unusual. My mother, Catherine, stepped out first, immaculately dressed, as always in designer casual wear that somehow looked too formal for the countryside. My father, Robert, followed, already scanning the property with analytical eyes. "Jason, darling." My mother called out as I opened the front door. "What a surprise to find you actually home." Her smile did not reach her eyes as she air-kissed my cheek. "It is my home, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "What brings you out here unannounced?" Can parents not visit their son without a formal invitation? My father clapped my shoulder too firmly. "We were in the area and thought we would check on you." They were never in the area. Their world revolved around their suburb and downtown Chicago. The country house might as well have been on another planet. I showed them inside, suddenly seeing the space through their critical eyes. The living room renovation was half finished. Tools and materials occupied one corner. My design work was spread across the dining table. To me, it was a home in creative progress. To them, it clearly looked chaotic and unprofessional. "So much space for just one person," my mother commented, running a finger along a bookshelf as if checking for dust. "Your grandfather really should have considered downsizing in his later years." "He loved this house," I defended, "and now I do too." My father had wandered into the kitchen, opening cabinets and checking the ceiling. "Roof looks like it will need work soon. Foundation too, from what I could see outside. These old places are money pits, son." "I am handling it," I said, growing increasingly uncomfortable with their inspection tour. The next 2 hours continued in this vein. My mother making passive-aggressive comments about wasted potential and isolation. My father assessing the property like an appraiser rather than a visitor. When they finally sat down for the lunch, I prepared, my mother steered the conversation toward Amanda. "Your sister is having such a difficult time with this pregnancy," she sighed dramatically. "The morning sickness has been terrible, and the stress of working while trying to find a suitable place to live is taking a toll." "I thought she and Tyler were happy in their downtown apartment," I said, remembering my sister bragging about the building's amenities at the last family gathering. "That was before the baby," my father interjected. "That place is barely big enough for 2 adults, let alone a family. They have been looking for months, but the market is brutal right now." I nodded sympathetically, but felt a growing sense of unease about where this conversation was heading. "Such a shame that assets are not distributed according to need in this family," my mother added, looking pointedly around the country house. "Some have more space than they could ever use, while others struggle to find a proper home for a new baby." The implication hung in the air like a storm cloud. I changed the subject, asking about their social calendar for the upcoming holidays. They allowed the diversion, but the tension remained palpable. After they left, I sat on the porch, my grandfather's favorite spot, trying to process what had just happened. Their visit had not been casual or spontaneous. It had been a reconnaissance mission. My phone rang an hour later. It was Amanda. This in itself was unusual. We typically texted on birthdays and holidays, rarely calling without specific purpose. "Hey Jason," her voice sounded strained. "Mom said they stopped by to see you today." "Yeah, they did. Surprising visit. They have been helping us look for a new place. The baby is due in 4 months, and we are getting desperate. Nothing in our price range is suitable." She paused meaningfully. "They mentioned that you have that big house all to yourself out there." The pieces clicked into place. "Amanda, Are you suggesting what I think you are suggesting? Look, I am not saying you should just give it up, she backpedaled slightly. But if you sold it, you could easily get a nice apartment in the city. Probably have money left over too. And it would really help us out during this difficult time. My heart pounded in my chest. That house was Grandpa Walter's gift to me. He wanted me to have it specifically. He did not know I would be starting a family when he made that will, she countered. Things change, Jason. Family should help family. The conversation ended awkwardly with promises to think about things that neither of us meant. After hanging up, I walked through each room of the house, touching the walls, the door frames, the windowsills that my grandfather and I had worked on together. This was not just property to me. It was the physical embodiment of our relationship, of his legacy. The next day, I met Logan at his hardware store to pick up supplies for my bathroom renovation project. His usual cheerful greeting faded when he saw my expression. "Rough day?" he asked, leaning against the counter. I found myself telling him about my parents' visit and Amanda's call. Logan had heard plenty of stories about my family dynamics over our months of friendship. "Family can be complicated," he said thoughtfully, "especially when it comes to property and money. My brothers and I did not speak for 2 years after our mom passed, fighting over who got her china cabinet of all things. This is not about the monetary value," I tried to explain. "This house is all I have left of Grandpa. The only place I have ever felt truly at home." "I understand that," Logan nodded. "But your parents probably see it differently. To them it is an asset that could be liquidated to solve a problem." "What would you do?" I asked him. He considered for a moment. "I cannot tell you what to do, Jason. But I know how much that house means to you. Just be prepared." In my experience, when family starts eyeing property, they rarely back down easily. His warning stayed with me as I drove home. The country roads that usually brought me peace now felt shadowed by my family's unexpected intrusion into my sanctuary. For the first time since moving in, I locked all the doors that night. The next week brought a flurry of texts and calls from my mother. Each communication seemingly casual, but inevitably steering toward Amanda's housing situation and the baby's impending arrival. My father sent links to articles about the booming real estate market and how rural properties were selling at premium prices if you act quickly. The pressure was building, and I knew a confrontation was inevitable. What I did not know was how ugly it would become. 3 weeks after my parents' surprise visit, I received a formal text message from my father. "Family dinner this Sunday at 6 p.m. Important matters to discuss. Attendance mandatory." The wording was so characteristic of him. Even invitations were framed as corporate directives. I considered not going. The country house was 2 hours from their suburb, and I could easily claim a work deadline. But avoiding the situation would only postpone the inevitable. Better to face whatever they were planning head-on. That Sunday, I arrived at my parents' immaculate colonial-style home exactly at 6. My mother answered the door with a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "Jason, right on time. Everyone is in the dining room." Everyone I had expected, only my parents. As I entered the formal dining room with its crystal chandelier and uncomfortable high-back chairs, I found not just my parents, but also Amanda and her boyfriend Tyler. Amanda looked pale, one hand resting protectively on her slightly swollen belly. Tyler sat beside her, his expression a mixture of entitlement and annoyance, as if this meeting was cutting into his valuable time. "Son," my father stood and gestured to an empty chair. "Sit down. We have important family business to discuss." The table was set with my mother's best china, but no food was visible yet. This was clearly not a normal family dinner. This was a tribunal, and I was the defendant. Once I was seated, my mother rang a small bell, and our longtime housekeeper Maria appeared with salads. Only after she had retreated did my father clear his throat to begin. "We have called this family meeting to discuss a situation that affects all of us," he announced, in the same tone he probably used in boardroom presentations. "As you know, Amanda and Tyler are expecting their first child, your mother and I's first grandchild." Amanda sniffled on cue, dabbing at non-existent tears with her napkin. "The doctor says my blood pressure is concerning. The stress is not good for the baby." My mother reached over to pat her hand, which is why finding suitable housing quickly is so important for her health and the baby's well-being. We have looked at 37 properties. Tyler added his voice, carrying the irritation of someone unaccustomed to not getting what he wants immediately. Nothing meets our needs within our budget, even with both our salaries. I sat silently pushing lettuce around my plate, waiting for them to arrive at the point we all knew was coming. My father folded his hands on the table. Jason, your grandfather's house is sitting mostly empty, being used by only one person while your sister faces a housing crisis during a vulnerable time in her life. It is not empty, I countered. I live there full time. A single man does not need 5 acres and 3 bedrooms, my mother stated flatly. It is wasteful. Amanda leaned forward, her expression practiced to perfection. Jason, I would never ask you to give up something important to you, but... She paused dramatically. She is pregnant now, and she needs her own place. The way she referred to herself in the third person struck me as particularly manipulative. I put down my fork and looked around the table. Let me make sure I understand what is happening here. You have invited me to dinner to ask me to sell Grandpa Walter's house, which he specifically left to me in his will, so that Amanda and Tyler can use the money to buy an apartment. Not ask, my father corrected. We expect it as the right thing to do. Family takes care of family. The house was left to me because Grandpa knew how much it meant to me. We worked on it together for years. I have built my life there now. My mother made a dismissive gesture. You can build a life anywhere. Your graphic design computer work can be done from any location. Your sister has an established career in a specific firm. She cannot simply relocate to the countryside. And what about what Grandpa wanted, his specific wishes, that I should have the house? My father's expression darkened. Your grandfather was not thinking clearly in his final months, and he did not know all the facts. What facts? We loaned him money for the property taxes and a new heating system 5 years ago, my father revealed. A substantial amount that he promised to repay, but never did. He was not as financially stable as you might believe. This was news to me. I had never heard of my parents helping financially with the country house. But it did not change the central issue. Even if that is true, he still chose to leave the house to me. It was his decision. Tyler, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. Look, man, nobody is saying you cannot visit the place. After we sell it and split the money, you can keep a small portion to remember your grandpa by. Maybe a piece of furniture or whatever. His cavalier tone made my blood boil. Split the money. The house was left to me, not to the family collectively. But if not for our financial help, there might not have been a house to leave, my mother pointed out. Your grandfather's sentimentality should not override practical family needs. Amanda began to cry in earnest now. I just want a safe place for my baby. Is that too much to ask? The doctor says my condition could become preeclampsia if my stress levels do not improve. I felt cornered and manipulated. I am sorry about your housing situation and your health concerns, Amanda, truly. But selling the country house is not the answer. That place is my home now. My father's facade of reasonableness finally cracked. This is exactly the selfishness you have always displayed. Always thinking of yourself first, never considering the family's collective needs. Collective needs, I repeated incredulously. When have any of you considered what I needed? Grandpa was the only one who ever supported my choices. And look where that got you, my mother snapped. Living like a hermit in a decaying house, wasting your education on freelance work while your sister has built a respectable career and is starting a family. The comparison stung precisely because it echoed doubts I sometimes harbored in my darkest moments. Was I wasting my potential? Was my attachment to the house holding me back? The property has appreciated considerably. My father continued, his tone softening into his salesman voice. The proceeds would solve Amanda's housing issue and still leave you with enough for a comfortable apartment in the city. You could reconnect with your professional network, find a real job again. I have a real job, I defended, and a real home that means something to me. Tyler rolled his eyes. Dude, it is just a house. People buy and sell them every day. Not this house, I said firmly. Not my house. My father's expression hardened. Then you leave us no choice. We will contest the will on grounds that Walter was not of sound mind and that we have a financial interest in the property due to our unpaid loans. You would do that? I was genuinely shocked. Drag the family through a legal battle? We would rather not, my mother said smoothly. But if you force our hand by being unreasonable, then yes. Amanda was openly sobbing now. I just want what is best for my baby. Why are you being so cruel? I stood up, unable to take any more. I am not being cruel. I am honoring Grandpa's wishes and protecting my home. I am sorry you are struggling to find housing, Amanda, but that does not give you the right to take what is mine. Nothing is truly yours, my father barked. Everything you have came from this family, including that house. No, I corrected him. The house came from Grandpa Walter, who understood me better than any of you ever have. I walked out then, leaving my salad untouched and ignoring my mother's calls to come back and be reasonable. My hands were shaking as I started my car. The perfect lawn and colonial columns of my parents' house had never felt less like home to me. The drive back to the country house was a blur of emotions. Anger at their entitlement, hurt at their manipulation, fear that they might actually follow through on their threat to contest the will, and beneath it all, a deep sadness that my family could view something so personally meaningful to me as nothing more than a financial asset to be liquidated. When I finally pulled into my gravel driveway, the moonlight was casting long shadows across the porch where my grandfather and I had spent so many evenings. I sat in my car for a long time, wondering what he would advise me to do in this situation. The house looked back at me solid and welcoming, despite its imperfections. My sanctuary was under threat, and I had no idea how to protect it. The morning after the disastrous family dinner, I called in sick to my freelance clients and drove to the county seat. I needed legal advice, and I needed it immediately. My father was not a man who made idle threats. If he said he would contest the will, he was probably already consulting with attorneys. The law office of Patricia Winters specialized in estate law. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who listened to my story without interruption, taking occasional notes. Can they really contest the will? I asked when I had finished explaining the situation. Grandpa was completely lucid when he made it. The cancer affected his body, not his mind. Patricia leaned back in her chair. They can certainly try. Anyone can contest a will if they believe they have grounds. The question is whether they would succeed. She tapped her pen thoughtfully. You said your father claims they loaned money to your grandfather for taxes and repairs? Yes, but this is the first I have heard of it. Grandpa never mentioned any loan. Was there any written agreement, promissory note, bank transfers showing the loan? I have no idea, I admitted. Even if there was, would that invalidate Grandpa's will? Not necessarily, but it could complicate matters. If they can prove they had a financial interest in the property, they might be able to claim a portion of its value, though not ownership of the house itself. She asked to see a copy of the will, which fortunately I had brought with me. After reviewing it carefully, she looked up with raised eyebrows. Did you read this entire document yourself? Just the parts the attorney highlighted during the reading, I confessed. Well, you might want to look at Section 12. She turned the document around and pointed to a paragraph I had indeed overlooked. It read, Any outstanding financial obligations between myself and my son Robert Williams and his wife Catherine Williams are hereby considered forgiven and settled in full upon my death. What does that mean exactly? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. It means your grandfather acknowledged any loans or financial assistance from your parents and explicitly forgave those debts in his will. This significantly weakens any claim they might have based on financial interest in the property. Relief flooded through me. So they cannot take the house. Patricia was more cautious. They could still attempt to prove your grandfather was not of sound mind when he made the will. It would be a difficult case for them to win if his doctors were willing to testify to his mental competence, but legal battles are unpredictable and always expensive. I left her office with a clearer understanding of my legal position, but no resolution to my dilemma. Even if I could successfully defend against a legal challenge, the emotional toll of fighting my family in court would be devastating, and the financial cost could force me to sell the house anyway to pay legal fees. Over the next week, I researched property values in the area. The market was indeed strong, as my father had claimed. The house and land could sell for substantially more than my grandfather had paid for it. But that had never been the point. The country house was not an investment to me. It was my connection to the grandfather who had understood and accepted me when my own parents never had. I ignored calls and texts from my family needing space to think. My mother left voicemails alternating between guilt trips and thinly veiled threats. My father emailed links to real estate listings for city apartments, as if the decision had already been made. Amanda sent a sonogram image with the caption, "Your niece needs a home," which felt like emotional blackmail of the highest order. 10 days after the family confrontation, I was repairing a fence post when a car I did not recognize pulled into my driveway. An elderly man with military posture stepped out looking around appreciatively at the property. "You must be Jason," he called out. "Walter's grandson." I approached cautiously. "Yes, that is me. And you are?" "Benjamin Harrison." He extended a weathered hand. "I served with your grandfather in the Army, 62nd Engineers. We kept in touch all these years." I shook his hand, recognition dawning. "You are Benny. Grandpa told me stories about you. You two built a bridge under enemy fire in Korea." Benjamin chuckled. "Your grandfather always exaggerated that story. It was just a small footbridge, and the enemy fire was very far away. May I?" He gestured toward the house. I invited him in, and as we walked the property, Benjamin shared stories about my grandfather that I had never heard. They had been writing letters to each other for decades. Walter had apparently mentioned me often in those letters. "He was mighty proud of you," Benjamin said, as we sat on the porch with glasses of iced tea. "Said you had a real appreciation for craftsmanship and history, not like the rest of the family." I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. I am trying to honor his legacy by taking care of this place, but my family has other ideas. Something in my tone must have revealed my distress, because Benjamin looked at me shrewdly. Trouble with the inheritance. Before I knew it, I was telling this virtual stranger about my family's demand that I sell the house for Amanda's benefit. Benjamin listened quietly, nodding occasionally. "Families and property," he sighed when I had finished. "A tale as old as time. My own children fought like cats and dogs over my farm when my wife passed. I ended up selling it to a neighbor just to keep the peace." "Did you regret it?" I asked. "Every day," he admitted. "But I found another solution eventually." He paused, seeming to consider something. "You know, I have been looking for a place in this area. Wanted to retire somewhere with trees and quiet. Been in Arizona too long. Too dry for these old bones." I looked at him with surprise. "You are looking to buy property around here?" "Been looking for 6 months. Nothing feels right." He gazed around appreciatively. Walter always did have an eye for the perfect spot. A wild idea began to form in my mind. Would you be interested in this place?" Benjamin looked startled. "Your grandfather's house. I thought you were fighting to keep it." "I am," I said slowly, the plan crystallizing as I spoke. "But maybe there is another way. One that honors what Grandpa wanted while solving my family problem." Over the next 2 hours, Benjamin and I talked extensively. He had known my grandfather for 60 years. He understood the value of the house beyond its market price. And most importantly, he shared my vision for preserving its character rather than developing the land or gutting the interior for modern tastes. "If I were to buy this place," Benjamin said thoughtfully, "I would want someone who knows its history to help maintain it. Perhaps a caretaker arrangement of some kind." By the time he left that evening, we had the beginnings of an agreement. Benjamin would purchase the house at a fair market price, allowing me to resolve the family conflict with money. But unlike a standard sale, our arrangement would include conditions. The character of the house would be preserved, I would have regular access to continue working on projects, and most importantly, the property would never be sold to developers. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I consulted with Patricia Winters about crafting a sales agreement that would protect the house's integrity through legal covenants. Benjamin had the property professionally appraised and inspected. We negotiated terms that satisfied both our needs, financial and emotional. There was a moment signing the final paperwork in the attorney's office when doubt crashed over me. Was I betraying my grandfather's wish by selling the house? Benjamin seemed to sense my hesitation. "Walter wanted someone who understood the soul of this place to have it," he said quietly. That is still happening, just not exactly as he planned. Sometimes, honoring someone's intentions means finding a creative solution they could not have foreseen. His words reassured me. This was not a surrender. It was a strategic retreat that would ultimately protect what mattered most about the country house. The money would go into my bank account, but my family did not need to know the details of the sale or the continued connection I would have to the property. As Benjamin and I shook hands after signing, he said something that cemented my conviction that I had made the right choice. Walter always said, "You were the clever one in the family." Now I see what he meant. The sale was completed quietly without fanfare. I did not inform my family immediately. Part of me wanted to see how far they would push their threats before revealing that their leverage was already gone. Another part simply needed time to process the enormous change in my circumstances. Benjamin took possession of the house but invited me to continue using the workshop anytime I wanted. "This place has 2 centuries of history ahead of it," he told me. "We are just its current caretakers." For the first time since the confrontation with my family, I felt like I could breathe again. I had found a solution that they could not have anticipated, one that honored my grandfather's legacy while removing their ability to weaponize the inheritance against me. Now I just had to prepare for their reaction when they discovered what I had done. 2 days after finalizing the sale to Benjamin, my phone rang with my father's number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. "Jason, we have been more than patient with your childish silence. Your mother and I have contacted Riverdale Realty to arrange an assessment of the property next week. We expect your cooperation. The agent said properties like yours are selling within days of listing. Amanda's doctor has recommended bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy, making her housing situation even more urgent. Call me back immediately." They had contacted a real estate agent for my house without my knowledge or permission. The audacity was breathtaking. But it also confirmed I had made the right decision by selling to Benjamin. I did not return the call. Instead, I found an apartment in a neighboring town close enough to visit the country house regularly, but far enough from my family to maintain my independence. I began quietly moving my personal belongings, leaving the furniture and fixtures that Benjamin had purchased with the property. 3 days later, my mother called. Again, I let it go to voicemail. "Jason, this silent treatment is beneath you. Your sister had another doctor appointment yesterday. Her blood pressure is dangerously elevated. The doctor says the stress of their housing situation is contributing to her condition. I never thought my own son could be so callous toward his sister and unborn niece. We raised you better than this." The emotional manipulation was so transparent, it would have been laughable if it were not so hurtful. I considered calling them back to reveal the sale, but decided timing was crucial. Once they knew the house was sold, any possibility of reconciliation might vanish. I wanted to be fully settled in my new place first. A week passed. The calls and messages intensified. Amanda texted daily updates about her pregnancy complications. My father emailed documents about contesting wills and property rights, clearly trying to intimidate me. Friends of the family began reaching out, having obviously been recruited to pressure me. My mother's college friend Susan called one afternoon. "Jason, dear, I have known you since you were a baby. Your mother is beside herself with worry about Amanda. Surely there is a compromise to be found here. That house is just a building. Family is what matters." I thanked her politely for her concern, but explained it was a private family matter. Inside, I was seething. My parents were broadcasting our dispute to their entire social circle, undoubtedly presenting a one-sided version that painted me as the villain. The pressure continued mounting. My father left a voicemail stating he had consulted with their attorney about filing a formal challenge to the will. My mother texted that Amanda had been hospitalized briefly for monitoring due to her blood pressure, adding, "I hope you can live with yourself knowing you are causing this." I spoke with Martin during one of our regular hikes near the country house, carefully avoiding revealing that I no longer owned the property. His perspective as an outsider was invaluable. "Sounds like classic family power dynamics," he observed. "Your parents are used to controlling the narrative and getting their way. By standing your ground, you are challenging their authority, not just protecting your inheritance." "Do you think I am being selfish?" I asked the question that had been haunting me, despite my certainty that selling to Benjamin was the right solution. "Honoring your grandfather's wishes is not selfish," Martin said firmly. And from what you have told me, your sister and her boyfriend could find housing if they were willing to compromise on their expectations. This feels more about control than actual need." His words strengthened my resolve. I was not going to be manipulated into feeling guilty for a situation I had already resolved in the best way possible. The breaking point came 2 weeks after the sale. My father called on a Sunday morning, and for once I answered. Finally decided to act like an adult, he barked without preamble. "Hello to you too, Dad." "We have found a buyer," he announced triumphantly. "Horizon Development is interested in the entire property. They will pay top dollar, no inspection required. They plan to build luxury vacation homes. The papers can be drawn up immediately." My blood ran cold at the thought of developers bulldozing my grandfather's beloved house and clearing the woods for a subdivision. It confirmed every fear I had about what would happen if my family gained control of the property. "That is not happening," I said firmly. "This is not a negotiation, Jason. Your sister needs." "I know what Amanda supposedly needs," I interrupted. "And I know what Grandpa Walter wanted. I have found a solution that addresses both." "What are you talking about?" His voice carried a note of suspicion. "I will explain everything tomorrow. Can you gather everyone at your house at 7 p.m.? And by everyone I mean you, Mom, Amanda, and Tyler. We are not playing games here, Jason. Neither am I, Dad. 7 p.m. tomorrow. I will see you then." I hung up, before he could argue further. The confrontation I had been avoiding was now inevitable, but at least it would be on my terms. I spent the rest of the day preparing what I would say, and steeling myself for their reactions. The next evening, I arrived at my parents' house exactly at 7. My mother opened the door with a tight smile that suggested she expected me to capitulate to their demands. The tableau in the living room was clearly staged for maximum emotional impact. Amanda lay on the sofa, looking pale and fragile, Tyler hovering protectively nearby. My father stood by the fireplace in a power pose straight out of a business negotiation seminar. "Jason," my mother gestured to an empty chair, positioned to face all of them. "We are so glad you have come to your senses." I remained standing. "I have come to tell you what I have decided about the country house." My father smiled triumphantly. "The Horizon Development offer is extremely generous. Their representative can meet us at the property this weekend to finalize details." "That will not be possible," I said calmly, "because the house is no longer mine to sell." A moment of confused silence fell over the room. "What do you mean?" Amanda finally asked, sitting up straighter. "I sold the house 2 weeks ago to Benjamin Harrison, Grandpa Walter's army buddy and friend of 60 years. The sale has been finalized. The funds have been transferred. The deed has been recorded with the county." The shock on their faces would have been comical, under different circumstances. "You did what?" my father roared, his face flushing dangerously. "You cannot be serious," my mother gasped. "Without consulting us, without considering Amanda's needs." Amanda burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. Tyler looked murderous. "I found a solution that honored Grandpa's wishes while addressing the family's concerns about the property's value," I explained, maintaining my composure with effort. "Benjamin understands the history and significance of the house. He will preserve its character rather than demolishing it for development." "You had no right," my father shouted. "We were in discussions about that property." "No, Dad. You were making demands and threats about a property that was legally mine to sell as I saw fit." "How much?" Tyler asked suddenly. "How much did this old man pay you?" I named the figure, which was fair market value, possibly even slightly above what a traditional sale might have yielded. Tyler's expression shifted from anger to calculation. "Well, that solves the problem then. With that much money, you can easily help Amanda and me buy an appropriate place." And there it was. The true motivation laid bare. This had never been about me selling the house. It had been about them gaining access to the value of the property all along. "I will be using a portion of the proceeds to purchase my own apartment," I said. "The rest will be invested for my future." "After everything we have done for you," my mother's voice trembled with either genuine emotion or practiced manipulation. I could no longer tell the difference. "This is how you repay your family." "This conversation is over," my father declared. "We will contest the sale. No judge will uphold a transaction clearly made to circumvent family obligations. The sale was completely legal, I replied, and Grandpa's will explicitly forgave any financial assistance you provided him, negating your claim of interest in the property. My attorney has all the documentation ready, should you choose to pursue legal action. My father looked as if he might have a stroke. My mother collapsed dramatically into a chair. Amanda continued sobbing, while Tyler paced the room, likely recalculating his financial plans, now that the house windfall was beyond his reach. I turned to leave, having said what I came to say. As I reached the door, I paused and looked back at them. I am sorry it came to this. I truly am. But the country house deserved better than to be sacrificed for your idea of what my life should be. I walked out into the cool evening air feeling simultaneously liberated and heartbroken. The family battle was effectively over. But at what cost to our already strained relationships? Only time would tell. 3 days after revealing the sale to my family, I was settling into my new apartment when my phone buzzed with a security alert. When I had moved out of the country house, I had left the security system I had installed active with Benjamin's permission. The alert showed motion detection on the front porch. I opened the app to check the camera feed and froze in disbelief. My father and Tyler were on the porch, Tyler working on the lock with what appeared to be a set of tools. They were breaking into the house. I immediately called Benjamin, who was out of town visiting his daughter. Benjamin, my father and sister's boyfriend, are breaking into the house right now. I am watching them on the security camera. Call the police, he responded, without hesitation. I will be back in town in 3 hours, but do not wait for me. This is breaking and entering. I called the local sheriff's department, explaining the situation as calmly as I could. Then I got in my car and drove the 30 minutes to the country house, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and anxiety. When I arrived, my father's luxury SUV was parked in the driveway. I parked behind it, blocking their exit, just as a sheriff's deputy vehicle pulled up. Deputy Collins was someone I knew from the local hardware store. He approached me with a concerned expression. Jason, dispatch said, "We have a break-in at your grandfather's old place." "It is not my grandfather's place anymore," I explained quickly. "I sold it legally to Benjamin Harrison. The men inside are my father and my sister's boyfriend. They have no permission to be there." As if on cue, the front door opened, and my father emerged with a notepad in hand, followed by Tyler carrying a tape measure. They froze at the sight of the deputy. "What is going on here?" my father demanded, attempting to sound authoritative despite being caught in the act. "Sir, I need to see some identification," Deputy Collins requested. "We have a report of unauthorized entry at this property." "This is a family matter," my father dismissed. "My son is being difficult about the family home. We are just assessing it for sale." "The house has already been sold," I interjected. "It belongs to Benjamin Harrison now. I informed you of this 3 days ago." Tyler stepped forward aggressively. "That sale is not valid. It was done in bad faith to prevent Amanda from getting her fair share." Deputy Collins held up his hand. "Regardless of any family dispute, if you do not have permission from the current owner to be here, this is breaking and entering, which is a criminal offense." "This is absurd," my father scoffed. "I am Robert Williams. I am a partner at Williams, Douglas & Chen. I do not break into houses." "Yet here you are," I said quietly. As they argued with the deputy, a truck pulled into the driveway. Benjamin had somehow made it back much sooner than expected. He stepped out his military bearing, evident even at his age. "What is happening at my house?" he asked, approaching our group. My father turned to him with narrowed eyes. "You must be the so-called buyer. Let me be clear. This sale will not stand. My son had no right to sell family property without consultation." Benjamin stood tall, despite being several inches shorter than my father. "The deed is in my name, properly recorded with the county. Your son had every legal right to sell his property to me, and I had every legal right to buy it. You were clearly complicit in a scheme to defraud the family," Tyler accused. Deputy Collins intervened. "Sir, these are civil matters to be discussed with attorneys. Right now, we are dealing with the criminal matter of unauthorized entry to private property. Mr. Harrison, do you want to press charges?" Benjamin looked at my father and Tyler thoughtfully. I do. What followed was surreal. Deputy Collins placed both my father and Tyler in handcuffs, reading them their rights as my father threatened lawsuits and professional consequences. Tyler alternated between begging for leniency and casting blame on my father for the idea. Neither showed any remorse or recognition that what they had done was wrong. As they were placed in the deputy's vehicle, my father locked eyes with me. This is not over, Jason. You have betrayed this family for the last time. After they were driven away, Benjamin and I inspected the house. Nothing appeared to be damaged or taken, though my father's notepad revealed he had been making extensive notes about the property's features and potential value. I am so sorry about this, I told Benjamin. I never imagined they would go this far. Benjamin shook his head. People do desperate things when money and property are involved. I have seen it before. He patted my shoulder. Do not worry. This house has withstood storms for 70 years. It will weather this one too. I drove to the sheriff's station to provide a formal statement. My mother was already there, alternating between berating the deputies and calling family attorneys. She saw me and pointed accusingly. This is your fault. Your father has never been arrested in his life. The humiliation this will cause. He broke into someone else's house, Mom. What did he expect would happen? It is our family home. No, I corrected her firmly. It was Grandpa Walter's home. Then it was my home. Now it is Benjamin's home. It was never yours or Dad's. She turned away, unable to argue with the simple truth of my statement. Amanda arrived shortly after, moving quickly despite her pregnancy. She cornered me in the waiting area. How could you do this to Dad, to Tyler? She demanded, her eyes red from crying. I did not do anything to them. They broke the law, Amanda. All of this could have been avoided if you had just accepted my decision. She lowered her voice. It was never just about an apartment for me, you know. What do you mean? Mom and Dad were going to move in with us. Their house is too big for them now, they said. The plan was to sell both properties, the country house and their house, and buy a large place for all of us. They have been having financial problems. The revelation stunned me. All the pressure, all the manipulation, had been about solving my parents' financial issues as much as Amanda's housing needs. They had been using her pregnancy as the sympathetic front for their own agenda. Why not just tell me the truth, I asked. Amanda looked away. Dad said you would never agree if you knew it was for them too, and the pregnancy complications. She hesitated. They are not as severe as we made them sound. The betrayal cut deep. So you lied. All of you used emotional manipulation to try to force me to give up something that mattered deeply to me. We are family, she said weakly. We are supposed to help each other. Family does not use and manipulate each other, Amanda. That is not love. That is exploitation. Tyler and my father were released on bail several hours later. The family attorneys were already working to minimize the damage, but the charges could not simply be made to disappear. My father was a prominent attorney himself, and the arrest would have professional repercussions regardless of the outcome. As we all stood awkwardly in the sheriff's station parking lot, the family fracture was complete. My father refused to look at me. My mother clutched her purse like a shield. Amanda leaned against Tyler, who glared at me with undisguised hatred. I never wanted any of this, I said into the silence. All I wanted was to honor Grandpa's wishes and keep the home that meant so much to both of us. You have made your choice, my father replied coldly, and we have seen your true colors. This family will move forward without you. They got into their respective vehicles and drove away, leaving me alone in the parking lot with the weight of what had transpired. The country house was safe with Benjamin, but the cost had been my family. As I drove back to my new apartment that night, I wondered if Grandpa Walter would have thought the price was worth paying. The legal aftermath of the break-in dragged on for months. My father and Tyler eventually accepted a plea deal for criminal trespass, a lesser charge than breaking and entering. They received probation and community service, the leniency largely due to my father's professional connections and clean prior record. I moved forward with my life, settling into my new apartment in town. It was a modern 2-bedroom unit above a bookstore, walking distance to cafes and shops. Different from the country house in every way, but it began to feel like home, as I furnished it with a few carefully chosen pieces I had crafted in my grandfather's workshop. My relationship with Benjamin evolved in unexpected ways. What had begun as a practical solution to a family dispute blossomed into a genuine friendship. He invited me to the country house regularly, and we worked on restoration projects together. He had a lifetime of stories about my grandfather, filling in gaps in my knowledge and understanding of the man who had shaped my life so profoundly. "Walter would be proud of how you handled things," Benjamin told me one afternoon as we repaired the garden fence, standing your ground without losing your integrity. That was his way too. Benjamin honored his promise to maintain the character of the house. He updated the electrical system and plumbing, but preserved the handcrafted details that gave the place its soul. The workshop became our shared domain, where we built furniture and taught occasional woodworking classes to interested locals. My connection to the community remained strong despite no longer owning the property. Logan and Martin still came by regularly now, friends with Benjamin as well. We held summer barbecues on the lawn where fireflies still danced at dusk, just as they had when my grandfather was alive. 3 months after the break-in incident, I received a text from Amanda. "Had the baby, a girl. Named her Sophia. Would like you to meet her someday when you are ready." It was the first communication from any family member since that night at the sheriff's station. I waited a week before responding, sorting through my complicated feelings. Finally, I texted back, "Congratulations. I would like to meet her too. Give me some time." 2 weeks later, Amanda came to my apartment alone. She looked exhausted but radiant in the way new mothers often do. Baby Sophia slept peacefully in her carrier. "Thank you for seeing me," Amanda said awkwardly as I invited them in. We sat in my small living room, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. "I want to apologize," she finally said, "for my part in everything that happened. The manipulation, the lies about my health. It was wrong." "Why did you go along with it?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me. She looked down at Sophia. "Part of it was genuine need. Tyler and I did want a bigger place for the baby. But mostly," she sighed, "Mom and Dad have always had such clear expectations. Follow the plan, get the rewards. I never learned how to stand up to them the way you did." We talked for over an hour. She explained that our parents' financial situation had deteriorated over the past few years due to risky investments and maintaining appearances. The country house had represented a solution to multiple problems. Tyler had been especially invested in the plan because his own financial situation was not as stable as he pretended. "Are you and Tyler okay?" I asked, noticing she had not mentioned him much. "We are working through things," she said carefully. The arrest was a wake-up call for him, for all of us really. As she prepared to leave, I asked about our parents. "Dad is still angry. His pride was hurt more than anything. Mom follows his lead as always." She paused at the door. "They might come around eventually, but I could not wait for that to happen. Sophia deserves to know her uncle." It was a small crack in the wall of family estrangement, but a meaningful one. I did not expect reconciliation with my parents anytime soon, if ever. But the connection with Amanda and my niece represented hope that not all family bonds were irreparably broken. Over the next year, I rebuilt my life with intention. My freelance business thrived as I focused on design work that fulfilled me creatively. I dated occasionally, made new friends, and continued my regular visits to the country house. Benjamin became the grandfather figure I had lost, wise and supportive, without being controlling. The legal threats from my parents never materialized into actual lawsuits. Their attorney likely advised them that contesting a completed sale to a third party would be costly and unlikely to succeed. They maintained their social and emotional distance, sending formal birthday cards, but nothing more personal. I began seeing a therapist to work through the complex emotions surrounding the family conflict. She helped me recognize patterns of manipulation I had normalized growing up and develop healthier boundaries. Honoring your grandfather's wishes was not selfish, she assured me during one session. And finding a solution that preserved the house while removing it as a source of family conflict was remarkably mature. "Then why does it still hurt sometimes?" I asked. "Because you lost something precious. Not the house itself, but the hope that your family could understand and respect what mattered to you. That is a real loss worthy of grief." 18 months after selling the country house, I stood on its porch with Benjamin, watching a spectacular sunset. The property looked better than ever, with gardens restored and structures maintained with careful attention to their history. "I have been thinking," Benjamin said contemplatively, "about adding a clause to my will." "What kind of clause?" I asked. "One that gives you right of first refusal if my children ever decide to sell this place after I am gone. They are good kids, but they are city people through and through. They will never live here." I was deeply touched by his consideration. "You do not have to do that." "I know. But it feels right. This place has a way of finding its way to the people who truly understand it." In that moment, I realized something profound. The country house had never really been about ownership. It had been about stewardship, about honoring connections across generations. My grandfather had understood that. Benjamin understood it too. My parents never had. The family conflict over the house had been painful, but it had forced me to define my own values and stand firm in protecting what mattered to me. I had lost my parents' approval, but gained something more valuable: self-respect and the freedom to live authentically. As the sun dipped below the tree line, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The country house was in good hands. So was I. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between honoring someone's wishes and keeping peace in your family? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of standing up for what matters resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Share with someone who might be struggling with family pressure or difficult choices. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes protecting your boundaries is the greatest act of self-respect. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.